in order to make sure we hit every single point here, we're going to start with how it began, going back to the beginning, rewind to the beginning of this conversation, because we need to chat about why the Oceanic teams didn't make it, which is part of the Australian government's issues with getting, basically they locked down their whole country until very recently when they announced that they were going to stop doing that. Thank God, because it was insane. But they couldn't attend. So George, what happened with the Australian teams?
Yeah, so the Oceanic teams are obviously going to be attending the North American LCQ, but there was quite a few issues prior to the event. And the problem is that all of this happened after about, about a month-ish. And this was when the issues really started to spark. I believe Riot said COVID-19 regulations, travel documentation issues, all that kind of stuff. When they released that statement, I sat there and I was like, you're not telling the full story about what happened. And I think they intentionally done that, obviously, because after I spoke to a player or two, it was pretty clear that there was a lack of communication between Riot Games and the teams, and this whole situation wasn't done properly at all. So the two teams that were planning to go were Order and Chiefs, both considered, the two of the best in the region, and this was the only shot they had to go to Champions. So they've been practicing for like 9 months. So this was a really, really big deal. And this whole travel situation was dealt with within a few weeks. And the problem is that after they secured qualification during their own regional event to secure a spot at LCQ, there was several times where I believe a manager or a member of staff from these teams would go to Riot, giving them details or requesting details, and they would just not get responses. And this happened, I believe, a few times. And after a lot of sort of conversations, and it eventually kind of got sorted, I guess. The problem is that the Riot team, I believe, just wasn't fully aware as to the travel restrictions in place by Australia. And there are quite a few.
Just describe them briefly. What Australia has done is they limit the number of people. Like, you have to have a reason to leave the country. In order for
your area. To move between essentially states, you can't do it unless you've got a reason.
So you have to get a business travel approval. Now, the thing about coming back into Australia is that the Australian government has capped the number of flights that go back to Australia. So there's only a specific number, and once those flights are booked, you're just fucked. You have to stay in wherever you are until you get.
There's an example that's on record, which is Spawn, who's obviously was at one point in time a commentator in League of Legends, is now the coach of the Team Liquid League of Legends Academy roster. He basically tweeted recently, like great news, I'm allowed to go home. Like, effectively, because he was just trapped outside his country for a while. Yeah,
he was in Los Angeles and he was trapped here in LA because there weren't any seats on the very few flights that the Australian government. So he got lucky and got a flight back to Melbourne. But this is when you're planning as a team. It's extensive because you might be in a situation where these players have to come to the United States and then can't leave for like 2 months because there's just no seats on flights. Continue.
So the key detail I want to spin this into something is essentially the second you get one of those Australian players to even leave his, I don't know if they're called states or territories or whatever, as soon as he even leaves that area, by the way, you've basically made him potentially commit to not being able to return home, potentially to his family, to any scenario whatsoever. So at that point in time, by the way, it ain't some joke that you then make it an online tournament, right? George, what I want to ask you more specifically is if you've got a timeline here, because I basically heard from some of the people in this region that, like, when you say communication was bad, I heard like 3 weeks ago, basically at the end of last month, end of September, we're doing this on the 18th of October right now, I basically heard some of them didn't even know stuff like what the format is, like when the dates of the matches are. I then heard similarly that, as you said, about like they tried to like basically fob it off like, oh, no one could know about the COVID-19 restrictions or that's what's holding us back. I heard it was the opposite, and basically, like you alluded to, it's more like someone just woke up out of a stupor and went, oh, is that thing in like 5 days? Better get on then. And they were contacting the bloody Australian government, basically just saying, like, can we have these people to come play babby video games in America? Like, as though, like, the Australian government, by the way, at the moment is pretty restrictive, are going to go, yeah, no problem, just send them off. And then similarly tied into that, as you can imagine, like Monty said about the flights are astronomical in price. So not only does that mean you're now doing that last minute, which is stupid enough anyway for flights, especially on that kind of long haul flight, but then you've got to add in, you're doing all of that, and if at the end it isn't a LAN, it was all for naught. Like, is the timeline in line with what you were hearing, George?
Yeah, no, that's 100% correct. I think in terms of like specific times, I believe like the return flights for these guys were going to be in like mid-November or something. Like, this event lasted for like a week or two. Like, it's not a long event, and these guys were going to stay in a country where they don't live, where the COVID situation is much worse, and they have to return home after like an extra month. It's awful. I thought it was really bad, but in terms of like the lack of communication, I think I'll leave like a quote from one of the players where they basically just said they were left in the dark right until the end, and that was basically the TLDR of the situation when it comes to sorting out these travel like documentation issues or whatever that Riot cited. So I think this is entirely on Riot for this one. I think when it comes to like overall issues about like ping and these other issues that we'll get into, I wouldn't say like the COVID situation, I wouldn't say it's entirely Riot's fault. Yes. But on this one, I would say they 100% missed the mark, and they need to do better. Because meanwhile, peace are being like sent out to Worlds or whatever, right? Yes. I mean, like these guys can just fly out whenever they want, and it's really bad, because when I look at this, it's like the Valorant team that deals with all this just don't care enough or don't have enough experience to deal with these guys and actually sort it in a proper fashion, and sort of follow up on the promises that they made, right? And yeah,
obviously we'll tie this in later when we talk about the suppression and the social media and all that angle. But again, you said the key thing there. Also, we're not just not getting transparency. Essentially, Riot Games is either at best being disingenuous with how they message this to the public, or just lying, just straight up lying, which is unacceptable. Because here's the thing, I can understand, like as you said, they obviously weren't responsible for the whole situation in the first place and why it's so difficult to come. But in that scenario, just be honest. Because the problem is, as far as I can tell, they weren't honest, because essentially they look like clowns. They look like they completely waited till the last minute and just sort of went, shit, what's going on? Oh, it's a week away or whatever, something ridiculous like that.
Yeah, it's also really bad for the Oceanic teams, because they, for the health of that scene, Australia is very difficult to run esports out of, because you just literally, it's at the ass end of the earth, and you can't, due to the speed of light, you can't really play competitive video games against anybody who's not Australian, and the country only has like 25 million people in it. So you're either having bad lag to the US West Coast, or you're having bad lag to Asia. So it's very critical for a lot of these orgs that they are able to be featured in international competition, because that's the way that they actually can get sponsors, are featured. So it's really terrible for them not to be able to go to this event in particular, because their domestic scene is very, very small, and they need this exposure in order to create revenue for the teams.
By the way, there's even a competitive angle that's slightly touched on this. So I'll bring up now, because it's a minor issue. We might not get to it later. Not everyone could even go. So they ended up with a ridiculous scenario where it was going to be a LAN, but then wasn't at least one of the coaches, I think it was also another coach in Europe, who were they were just fucking remote. And the joke is they were doing it like we do online CS tournaments, where there's just cameras behind the coach to make sure they're not cheating. But how does that make any sense competitively for somebody or everyone else to be in the same city playing a LAN, and then other people to be on other continents just going, let's just hope this fucking angle's legit, otherwise I'm just cheating, aren't I?
Yeah, that was another thing I was actually going to bring up as well.
All right.
So, I mean, yeah, just to touch on that a little bit, Elmer Puddy is the coach of Gen G, obviously formerly in CS as well. He's got quite a decorated career at this point. He was not coaching at the event. He was coaching remotely. So he didn't attend the event in person. But the details, I don't really know a lot about, but I just presume that Riot didn't access his PC, nor did they have a camera, nor did they have a referee in his room. I honestly don't know how they could keep it really, competitively integral at this point. And the delay on the stream, I believe it was minimal. So I don't even know, what he could have done. But again, this is just
that is madness as well. The idea he could just be watching the stream on his other fucking monitor.
Yeah, I'm not accusing him of doing this. I highly
of course not.
But just the fact that situation can exist is a problem.
Anytime you could effectively cheat using a series of fucking mirrors like a cartoon, There's something wrong there, isn't there? Like, that shouldn't even be on the table. All you'd have to have is like a mirror here and talk, well, I'm just fucking giving the game. You figure it out, you fucking idiots playing Valorant. I'm not going to help you cheat. We've already got enough problems with that in CSGO.
Too many problems.
Exactly. I caught myself for a second there.
There are so many cheating problems in CSGO. They're actually going to spill over directly into Valorant very soon. Well, technically they already have. They just haven't been announced yet.
Oh, that would be fun.
All right. So basically what happens is, it sounds like due to some short-sightedness from Riot, the Australian teams are not able to compete, which means that they probably, unless, has anything been announced about their ability to qualify via some other means for the World Championship?
I don't believe so. I think they were just compensated and told to fuck off, really. Yeah. They were just compensated, I presume, and then just basically told to fuck off. So that's basically how I see it. I think the Oceanic region should be appalled by the way that Riot handled it. I think it's absolutely abysmal. It was really bad, because I feel really bad for the scene. And it's not like these guys aren't like bad players either. They're really good players. Like, they can 100%, put up a fight against some of these teams at least. Maybe they're not better than some of, maybe they won't win, but they're still good enough to compete at this level. I mean, look at Renegades in CS, like back in the day. These guys were amazing, and we've even still got players in CS that are Australian that are still banging. So it's really silly when I see people say like, oh, they were never going to win anything anyway. It's like, well, that's not the point, is it? The point is that they were actually able to go to the event in the first place.
And again, it's important.
It's just like, fuck them. Just fuck them. They're not even good.
And some people were just like, oh, fuck the Oceanic teams. Who cares? Like, people were literally saying they wanted TSM, who didn't qualify for the event, to fucking be placed instead of them. Like, come on, man. I mean, I don't know.
I like to imagine scenarios where this happened to like 2 Brazilian teams or something, and fucking... The world would fucking burn. Like, everyone would go absolutely insane over it. It's just some regions don't get the kind of, collective respect that you have to sort of evenly distribute across all scenes. And I mean, my read on it was essentially they've been told, because remember, Riot has a presence in Australia. They've got an office out there and everything. My understanding is they were literally just told, like, it's not happening now, we're going to get you on the comeback though, keep quiet about it, don't fucking don't.
That seems to be emerging there, Richard.
Yeah, it's it's just, I've been here before so many times with this company. It's kind of like I have to keep catching myself while I'm talking about it to make sure I'm not in an LSD flashback.
Exactly. The irony is, on that particular case, it's kind of like in CSGO, because all the Australians have been told to keep it extreme mum. That was all right. It was all right. That was all right if you know CSGO.
He's writing your gags tonight, mate, but you better fire him
This is all the throwaway material for the major. I'm just getting through this shit to find what's going on.
I like that one.
Want to see more cool, funny, interesting clips based on topics from my content? Well, subscribe to this channel then, or, be a pleb and don't.